하이.
하이. 지금 동계선 중이에요. 와, 근데 어제 진짜 딱 했는데 숨 막혔어. 재밌긴 진짜 재밌는데 그 폐쇄 공포증급으로 진짜 어제 거 한번 다시 보기 봐보자. 진짜 끔찍함. 딱 등장할 때. 그 내가 거기 앞에서 계속 멍 때리고 서
앨리스면 뭐
있었잖아.
토끼가 나오나?
토끼는 아직 안 나오는데 진짜 어제 다시 보기 내가 틀어줄게 그냥. 진짜 심각함. 처음에 내가 이렇게 멍 때리다가 너무 하기 싫다. 그러니까 게임을 하기 싫은 게 아니라 앨리스는 하고 싶은데 너무 많으니까 이거도 몇 시간 걸려서 했는데 그래도 한 2시간 만에 끝냈던 것 같긴 한데 양은 생각보다 좀. 이제 시작하는 부분. 딱 여기에 들어와서 진짜 이 많은
이게 그거
길을
다 배관이야.
해서 이 집을 또 근데 좀 폐쇄공포증 느낌이 있어. 지하다 보니까. 근데 생각해보니까 저 고양이 사라졌네. 고양이 있었는데 실종됐어. 꼬리만 남겨. 그래서 정말 퀄리티가 DLC다 보니까 확실히 좋고 예쁘고 그리고 시간도 덜 걸리긴 하는데 좀 폐쇄 공포증 좀 심각했다. 다시 봐도 막 숨 막혀. 너무
난
좀.
뭔가 귀엽고 화사한 걸 줄 알았음.
아니 근데 닦았을 때 화사하지. 열심히 닦는 거를 보시면 입을 해서 화사해짐. 더러워서 너무 폐쇄 공포증. 화사해질수록 기분은 좋아지긴 해. 거의 1시간 넘게 걸려. 이게 그 힘든 과정이었고 난 저 창문 닦는 게 제일 좋았다. 그리고 난 짜잘한 거 닦는 거 되게 좋아. 슬심님 안녕하세요. 나 요새 엄마랑 사이 너무 안 좋아가지고 엄마랑 싸웠어. 엄마 너무 잔소리가 심해 진짜 듣기 싫어. 다 닦고 나서는 좀 화사해졌지?
이디귿 난 가끔 보는 사이라.
생각해보면은 어제 너무 졸려서 이 미술 작품을 하나하나 구경 못했는데. 뭔가 신비롭긴 함. 와, 나 추석 일주일 쉬는데 월급이 100만 원이 주는데 일주일 쉬는.
일급이 신가 보네.
맞아. 1급 있어요. 그래서 사실 쉬는 게 치명적이긴 한데 보강하기 싫어가지고 보강 안 한다고 했어. 뭐 관두는 애도 있기도 하고. 그리고 또 저번 달에는 8주년 후원도 있고 알바도 다른 알바도 잠깐 했어가지고 좀 여러 가지로 추가로 번 돈이 좀 많았지. 원데이 클래스 같은 것도 하고. 아, 폐쇄 공포증 언제 끝남? 헐, 나 시계 소리 진짜 싫어하는. 시계방임, 심지어. 공포 게임 아니야, 이거? 시계 소리 엄청 크다. 멸망. 힐링하려고 단 DLC 폐쇄 공포증. 내가 폐쇄 공포증 심하진 않은데 조금 있어요. 왜 애초에 앨리스랑 원더랜드가 음침하기도 하고 그 스토리가 마인드 컨트롤이랑 관련돼 있음. 그래서 세뇌시키고 막 그런 거라서 애초에. 왜냐면 사람이 이렇게 좁은 공간에 가면은 이런 폐쇄 공포증도 일어나고 답답하잖아. 그런 심리를 이용하는 거거든. 검색해보시면 나와요, 유튜브. 앨리스 원더랜드 마인드 컨트롤. 그래서 저는 그거를 이미 알고 있는 상태에서 재밌다길래 구매 결정해. 감수해야지. 근데 야외 닦는 게 확실히 기분은 훨씬 좋다. 아무리 가상세계라도 이게 이렇게 막혀있다는 것 자체가 너무 공포. 뭔가 창문이라도 좀 있지. 어제 그래서 내가 창문 닦을 때 기분이 좋았나 봐. 외부 세계랑 이어져 있다라는 생각이 드. 내가 어제 살인마 다큐멘터리 봤는데 범죄 다큐? 경찰도 나오고 막 변호사 나오고 실화 바탕으로 한 피해자 유족 나오고 엄청 재밌다라기보다는 그냥 생각할 거리가 많아지는. 그리고 이제 식인종 계획 세운 경찰 그 다큐도 보고 있는데 완전 미친놈 같은데.
밥 먹는 중.
Like when Gil had the lunch with his girl, they always say he was thinking about something. As far as coinciding with the chat, I knew, like, yeah, I had the chat, but, you know, I was with my wife's daughter. Nothing ever happened. They made the whole weekend out to the surveillance episode. I went down Friday night. I saw 5 people at weekend. I had my family down in Maryland. And the whole weekend, it was about surveillance. It was just... You need to get out of it. Right. When the cops can make a big deal of everything, it's easier to look up. Maybe about women. Yes, it's a violation. Yes, it's a crime. But looking at the timeline of between when he actually did the searches and when he was having chat stuff with women with other people on the Dark Status Network, it's not exactly clear that he's planning anything. They might have had more faith if you looked at that information and then 5 minutes later there's a record of him emailing somebody from the Dark Status Network years perhaps. But he didn't even give anybody on the Dark Status Network their addresses. He didn't even give them their last name. There's one potentially very telling moment in the past where somebody who says, what's her address? And Gil says, I can't do that, I can't do that. Suddenly the bubble bursts. This is Gil Googling someone he has the hots for. Only instead of Googling, he's in the police computer. Because he's at work and bored. Says, oh, I have the hots for Kimberly. I'm going to check out the information in the police database. So he does. And that's sick and creepy. But it's this, the action of the guy who's planning on firing a kidnapper.
The prosecution has cleared the jury beyond a reasonable doubt by a reasonable doubt. He actually was agreeing this crime, kidnapping women, and clear in this case against him. He has a tendency to want to punish people for who he thinks they are, as opposed to and so this could be a case where the jury heard the evidence, thought, oh, maybe think he was going to do it this time, but I'm worried he might do it in the future. I'm worried about the first this guy, creepy. And so later yourself against him. That he was convicting someone on what he wanted to do, not what he did. So we have to believe that he was going in that direction to actually commit a crime. It's easier to make a decision with facts. It's beyond the shadow of a doubt, reasonable doubt. And there was not anything that was fully and completely compelling. We had to understand this man through these facts. When the police got this information, absolutely they were right. No one in their right mind, I think, was exactly that his wife thinking, look what I have. They're being fat, and my husband already was sick, so it's no problem. But they should have said, go home, man, you live in jail, right? What's your stomach keeping this in here? It should have been as simple as an undercover agent signing up for an account on darkfetishnet.com and trying to engage them and make real claims.
Since Gil's conviction and since it's been popped out, there's been movement on other cases related to
아, 잘 먹었다.
where the Fed psychiatric staff is creating a sting operation. And there have been people who've been convicted
뭐 먹었음?
after doing it. Where the Fed psychiatric staff is creating a sting operation. And there have been people who've been convicted after domestic agent plan.
볶음김치 제육.
Actually went so far to create started collecting items that one could use in a real abduction torture scene. He had needles, handcuffs, that they took this so much farther than field trip. It makes you realize that there is this whole so many steps before you get to actually lunging out of a car.
창문이 있어야 좀 숨이 쉴 것 같아서 창문만
Some
닫아.
very reasonable people could come to the conclusion that unless and until he's in a car with the rope and the chloroform headed to wherever victim 3 lives, it's
다 실내내 디디귿.
some reasonable people could also say even that's not. It's not enough until he gets to the doorstep and victim 3 lives. It's not enough. Some reasonable people could also say even that's not.
그러니까 공간이 작아도 이렇게 창문이 있어서 그나마 다행이고 창문 없으면 더 공포스러울 것 같고 그
He's in a car with the rope and the chloroform.
공간이 작아서 좀 더 그런데 무서운데 실내라도 공간이 넓으면 결국
It's not enough until he
닦을 게 많을 거고
where victim 3 lives. It's not enough. Some reasonable people could also say even that's not. It's not enough until he gets to the doorstep and actually starts walking up the steps and is about to hit the doorbell and say, "Hi, it's Gilberto. Can I come up?" And some people would probably even quite reasonably conclude that we really don't know what's connected in that part.
There is always reasonable doubt about whether or not someone is going to take a particular action. We don't know, right? And police officers don't have some magical psychic wand that allows them to know either. We don't want to give the government the ability to decide what fantasies lead the thought police's bar for acceptability. That bar is slightly high. Look, if the First Amendment protects someone fantasizing about violently raping and killing and beating a woman, it's going to protect pretty much everything you're thinking about. And that's what principles do. They make us uncomfortable, we apply it regardless.
We're going down to Port.
색감 6분 후.
알록달록
Big news out of today. We'll put our house over.
근데 디자인은 되게 예뻐. 그러니까 DS의 차이는 더 예쁘고 특이한 디자인이 많다. 테마도 있고 콜라보 계약 같은 거. 좀 정성이 들어갔다.
Patient zero in the thought sleep epidemic that might sweep the nation. We're all determined to find possible for we're all determined to find
시계 지우.
and we feel like we can do it. The future is Monica in Peter Sedale. So to me that is an extraordinary
We had who we want at home to decide thought we included and would have in morning before free time would have typically in science fiction and morning before we have a free time. That's a dystopia movie. And I think that's because when you think about it, it's often hard for any individual person to even know themselves the line between what they are not accepted. Part of the mystery of humanity.
been a lot said about me, about me now, and you know, that
어디 충실한 노예 없나?
it's the only best for that. So people are really I'm not gonna- one of the most troubling gray areas of this is that most of us don't understand why someone would act like that. I don't think the jurors, I don't think the media, I don't think many people at all, but really most of the entire community understand the person. Is he a harmless teddy bear of a guy, or is he a nefarious master criminal? I really don't know. But here's the beautiful thing right here.
I think part of you wants me back, but the other part of you wants to kill me. I don't know which feeling it is. I'm afraid I don't know you at all.
What makes somebody an ethical human being isn't what they think, but what they choose to do with it. Somebody can be having the most dark, depraved thoughts, but if they don't do anything about them, or find an outlet that is entirely harmless, then that doesn't stop them being a decent human being. And in the gap between thought and action, that's where people actually discover what kind of human being they are. And I think people have to be allowed to make that discovery and then live with it.
There's no news yet with the appeal. They haven't submitted anything yet. Today's deadline. So I guess they have until 11:59. They'll probably wait till 11:50. But they're gonna appeal. I don't want to get my hopes up, but
일단 창문 많이 여니까 훨씬 나.
I don't know. They haven't
입지들.
filed it yet. But I don't want to get my hopes up. So they've been such a good bet.
주인이 맵 청소를 혼자 하다니.
But this really could be over tonight.
주인의 삶.
청소할수록 색감이 밝아졌긴 하네.
They have until midnight, so we'll wait until midnight. And that's it. They never asked for more time. And that, you know, the thing that we have until midnight, so we'll wait until midnight. And that's it. They never asked for more time. And that, you know, the thing that we dismissed. Nothing we see yet. Tick tock, that's still midnight. Still on. What an ending it would be, you know? And today they were all in, you know, in supervision. I'm not worried about, it's not like I'm gonna go out and commit a crime or anything like that. I have no desire, not the slightest inkling to get back on any FedEx website. Those days are gone. Nothing will be hanging over my head anymore.
Before sleeping, I woke up with lots of blood on my clothes down there. My heart started racing.
I'm on something called cases selection tables, and we're on the second circuit for sure. Yeah, I see it.
The person who
Yeah.
음.
7:30. Yep. We're looking at the wrong thing. Yeah. Yeah. Alright, but they file is around 7:30. Yeah. We're looking at the wrong thing. Same argument, you know, that I conduct surveillance. Yeah. Same argument, you know, that I conduct surveillance. Yeah. I did to have a trust. I'm not worried, don't worry about it. Today was, you know, enough of a good day. I'm not worried. I'll stop by tomorrow, alright?
디자인 예쁘다.
Alright, good. I hope my cell phone is not 700 yards from the body. And everything sort of overwhelming tonight. With the appeal coming and the notoriety that's now surrounding my life. Sometimes I feel like someone's watching me. But for the first couple weeks I was out, I realized that no one was really ready. So I started getting more and more comfortable going out. And I thought the next step was to get to dating. It's been a long time, you know. I think sometimes I'm craving a little, you know, craving companionship. There's nothing wrong with that. If I do go, you know, out with a girl, at what point in the dating process do I bring the both up? Either be, you know, run for the hills or be somewhat serious, interested. I don't know, there have to be people out there who, but some people are gonna think I should be locked up for the rest of my life. Just look around me. I made a bad mistake, a really bad mistake. Now it's not gonna cost me the rest of my life.
귀엽다, 둥근 디자인. 지가 토끼인데, 지가 토끼 치기를 쓰는 건데. 저 점심 좀 먹고 올게요. 난 시계 소리 싫어하니까 이렇게. 좀 그나마 깨끗한 거. 하네. 대전에서 엄마가 저 LiveStream 있다고 했을 때 문의주세요 LiveStream 어저께 그 LiveStream 회사를 가면은 내가 정말 LiveStream 그때 이미 준비했어. 근데 언니가 근데 막 혼내고 근데 그걸 모르고 내가 사람을 보면 내가 계획을 진짜 일과에서 내가 지었지. 그래서 그것 때문에 이제
당장 이응 립감.
너무 가르칠 수 없어. 진짜 나가 내가 때는 애기 생각하자. 아니 그래도 집중력이 너무 힘드는 자유가 있어서 뒤에서 너가 지금 생각하는 거가 알고 있는 거 하고 무슨 환자들이 무슨 역할을 못하냐 우리 자신 오는 사람은 우리 같은 사람인데 너무 욕하고 아파 그래 이거는 화가 해결 안 되는 근데 지금 엄마가 어렵게 하는 그 뒷자리를
어릴 때부터 그 게임을 하고 있으면 어릴 때 사람이 무식하니까 잘할 때 나가서 했어요. 근데 뭐 그건지 뭔지 그냥 어릴 때 게임 안 하고 근데 그래서 그렇게 노력했던 아이들도 찍었어요. 그래서 어머니는 그 얘기를 찍었어요. 그러니까 애들이 착한 애들이 그거를 되게 유용한 그리고 너가 남은 날 영향을 하는 거. 야 이거 알아보고 이거 키우다고 그랬는데 우리 엄마가 하는 거 내가 애들이 있었는데 우리가 그걸 그걸 풀리거든. 기억하지 않고 뭔가 또 목적이 되게 그 연락도 없었고 중학교 때도 없었고 그래가지고 이해가 없어. 근데 연락도 없고 이런데 그거 가르치면 애들 먹었어. 얘도 좋은 게 연락이면 이상해야 되는 어울리는 게 나한테 나 어떻게 싫어. 이런 인간이 어떻게 거 있을까? 그러니까 근데 그게 상대로가 좀 그렇게 생각하는데 우리는 절대 하고 생각하는 그러니까 우리가 약하대요. 애들이 나머지는 안 와서 게임이나 결정을 그러니까 그거만 봐야 되는 하니까 애들이 그러니까 그런 거는 아들이 해야 돼. 근데 내 생각에는 이거 우울증 진단 받으러 그랬어요. 우울증을 그러니까 ADHD처럼 지금 게임을 보고 우울증 진단 받고 ADHD 그냥 우울증이 있고 내 생각은 근데 ADHD 먼저 듣고 이거는 여기 전반적으로 사람들 그게 있었는데 그 ADHD 이상하게 그다음에 ADHD야 이런 거 물었을 때 잠을 더 자고 즐겁게 생각할 거라고 아니 ADHD야 그때 먹었더니 그렇다고 그랬어. 그래서 ADHD야 태어난 거는 전혀 안 와. 그러니까 내가 그때는 아니라 아침에 ADHD야 내려가는 우울증을 그러니까 그거 보니까 이거 근데 생각하고 비슷하게 지금 안 될까 봐 이거 안 나오는 거 이거 연습 야근 이거 얘기하면 좀더 부대주는 건가? 근데 이걸 하고 나 생각에는 ADHD를 먼저 치료하면 사실 안 되는 게
나는 ADHD ADHD는 그냥 불쌍히 안 나오는데 그런 거지. 아니 정말 전반적으로 ADHD는 약 나고 엄마 미안한데 ADHD는 약만 먹으면은 치료가 90% 이상 되는 거야. 매일매일 얘가 약을 못 먹으면 지금 ADHD 지금 있는 거야 나는. 민소리 의사쌤이 그랬어. 약물 치료는 거야 ADHD는 아예. 근데 애기들도 약 먹는 거잖아. 나 들어가거나 약 안 먹어. 왜냐면 공부하고 놓치고 내가 이렇게 애들 가르치는 건데 평상시에 진짜 나는 모르겠어. 근데 왜 저기 교회 갈때 아예 안 보고 왜 엄마 나 원래 애들 진짜 안 먹잖아. 아예 오늘 나 대학교 내년에 그래서 지루해서 필기 먹는 거야. 집중을 못하고 ADHD는 필기를 먹었는데 그리고 옛날에 치료적으로 자꾸 예측하고 이런 게 ADHD가 내가 오늘도 있을 때가 그러니까 호천적인 ADHD 아니 근데 양만 들자고 외국에는 못해 준다고 내가 그리고 이제 텔레폰에도 자기네들이 하는 것보다 니네 개인이 시각적으로 내가 완화가 많이 필요했어. 근데 그런데 굉장히 그 진상을 안 했을 때 일본이야. 일상이 낮은 거는 쓰고 안 나가. 엄마가 공박장에 있어. 공박장에 있어. 공박자가 공박장이 아니야. 그냥 엄마가 기억을 미쳤다가 왜 공박장이야? 그래서 빡빡빡빡하잖아. 수박하는 거 말고 호텔만 좋아하고 수박하는 게 아 그러니까 그때 엄마가 수박장이야. 엄마가 내가 그때 힘들어하고 아니 엄마가 내가 너한테 아니 아빠는 그렇게 안 하는데 너한테는 무슨 아니 엄마가 그렇게 해도 어떻게 뭐 그러는데 나 진짜 힘든데 오늘은 얘가 너 ADHD 돌렸잖아. 그게 너의 속도에 습관이 된 거지 너한테는. 그러니까 근데 너는 잃어버리고 그리고 엄마가 일을 잘하는 거야. 이렇게 습관적인 눈을 보여야 된다. 핸드폰으로 메모해놓으면 그 메모 의자가 딴짓거리 딴 거. 유튜브에다 비싸진 거니까 손가락으로 비슷하게 놓고 제가 핸드폰으로 놓고 메모에다가 들어가면 이렇게 그래서 이게 뭐가 아닌데 내가 아니 나 요즘 못 치는 이유는 나 지금 이거 스포가 하는 게 행복하지 않아서 힘들게 하고 있는데 엄마가 거기다 짜증까지 난 이제 춤하기 싫어. 다른 때는 과외를 할 때 엄마가 하는 거 받아줄 수 있지. 근데 지금 나는 애들 11명 이거 지금 안 해줄게. 일 때문에 하는 거야 진짜. 못 보는 말 등 때문에 하는 거야. 유아랑도 그렇고 오로지 등 때문에 하니까 행복하지 않아서 게임을 듣는 거야. 내가 과외할 때 게임 이 정도로 많이 안 했잖아. 보통 할 수 있을 때만 하고 나 어제 내일까지 게임 있어. 아니 노는 것도 게임 중독 보통 하려고 노는 거라니까. 이거는 계속 만나고 이상한 애들 갖고 있는데 얘만을 보죠. 그렇게 할 사람도 집까지 나가고 막 운동하고 스포츠를 마시는 거는 매일 그래서 뭐 그렇게 얘기했는데 진짜 돈이 없네. 그래서 나동거는 좀 많이 나 주식 투자 엄청 많이 하고 나 지금 조금만 내려? 그래서 모르는데 그거 안 들었어. 근데 똑같아요. 내가 소비를 하는 게 아니에요. 일단 6배를 하는 것도 아니고 이제 항상 내가 ADHD 맞다고 몇 번 내가 우울증도 맞고 ADHD도 맞다고 우울증도 말했는데 엄마는 잘못된 사람이잖아. ADHD 때문에 우울증이 생길 수도 있다고 했어. 왜냐면 사람이 진짜 지나가고 이런 특이한 거랑 할 때 불편해하는데 또 나는 왜 있는 그대로 돌아가는 게 나를 못하고 말이 엄청 많잖아. 이런 것도 있기 때문에 성의 때문에 이래서 때문에 이런 때문에 이런 얘기 안 하고 아니 왜냐면 내가 계속 말했잖아. 영어는 못하는 의지 문제는 거 보고 나 학교 시험도 맨날 무뎌가지고 일곱 번씩 영어 다시 풀고 그러다가 그게 아니라 너가 친구 때문에 친구들하고 이게 친구 때문에 그것도 맞으니까 너 친구 때문에 이런 때문에 너 한번 얘기한다는 사람이 근데 내가 하도 얘가 애고 있을 때는 얘 그만 놓지 않다가 연락 때문에 이렇게 바로 생겼어. 그걸 누가 나를 좋아해? 그걸 몰라. 왜냐면 내가 당장은 내가 소리 질러줘가지고 애들이 내가 시같이 잘 듣고 봐봐 엄마도 애들이 있다가 다 가는다고 했는데 우리도 뭐가 학교 가서 안 간대잖아. 중학생들도 들릴 줄 알았는데 다른 애들은 엄마가 부르는 분명히 애들 들어가지고 근데 애들이 그렇게 운동 가는 거 없고 엄마가 애들 심히 몰라서 그래. 물론 내가 하면 안 하면 줄여야 되는 거 나도 맞는데 애들 입장에서 따라가고 있으면 조용히 해! 싫어! 이렇게 생각한 거니까 안 그래. 요즘은 맞아. 여기 영어하고 언어가 호반이 얘들 근데 여기서는 되게 기분이 좋아. 근데 이렇게 외명이라고 지어서 그리고 가운데 나오는 아니 외명이었는데 한씩 나오는 비밀이랑 아니 3명 빠진 건데 이렇게 하는데 여기 그래서 오늘의 근데 우찬이도 말 잘 들어서 그냥 엄마가 소지가 들어갈 수가 없구나 그때 생각을 하는 거는데 나는 지원이고 그치 싶어서 나 엄마를 보냈지 내가 그래가지고 자기가 직장을 다니니까 아이들이 힘들고 그리고 나보니까 거기 학생들이 그러니까 진짜 여보고 있는다. 그래서 나는 마음이 가더라고. 아니 뭔가 그만해. 너를 돕는다는 거는 네 엄마도 대단한 사람. 되게 지렁하고 그랬어. 그래서 그랬어. 이제 그런 거 이런 거 그리고 너가 얘기 안 해주고 그리고 그때 내가 같은 나 얘기해야 되고 알았어. 그러니까 근데 여기서 보여줘. 내일 치워. 그렇게 치워도 유지가 되니까 뭐 더러워지지 않잖아. 하루에 더러워서 난 내일 치고 갈게. 쓰레기 맨날 갖다 줘. 아니 근데 내가 궁금한 말할 때도 되게 싫고 소금 말만 들어. 엄마도 똑같지. 바보가 아니라 왜? 그러니까 왜 그런 줄 알아? 내가? 이 신문가를 공식적으로 영어로 하는 거야. 멍청한 애들 예지 걸리는 건데 나는 똑똑해서 다 사람들이 나 유치하게 가고 나 좋아하는 애들 너 말 잘하니까 말을 그냥 고집이 있으면 안 해서 못 했어. 나 야구를 그러면 ADHD 있는데 주아가 나보다 더 심해. 힘나더라. 나를 방황시키는데 싫어. 싫어. 저 ADHD 이러고 치구나. 애들 잘하지. 여기 봐. 엄마, 내 교회에서도 ADHD 애들끼리 서로 그 사람이 먼저 포기해서 이렇게 해서 서로 친한 거지. 내가 먼저 I have ADHD라고 말하지 않고 누가 날 의심하고 있고 그냥 지금 의심이 없나 봐. 뭐 박사 그러고 이렇게 아 혹시 19명이 이렇게 말하려다 뭐 엄마랑 문자가 나누고 이렇게 내가 사역도 많이 하고 그냥 소리를 들어서 아니 그게 아니라 좀 엄마가 내일을 들어. 엄마가 내가 잘하거든. 안 들려. 이게 내 거라고. 내일은 와. 내일이 있으면 안시가 없는 거야. 오늘 나가가 났을 때. 근데 앞으로 내가 너무 그러니까 여자가 남자 쪽으로 나 남자 때문에 나 찾고 나 그리고 가만히 미니가 나이 애들 왜냐하면 그냥 그거 옷을 생각을 이렇게 아니 나도 ADHD를 많이 해보니까 엄마는 ADHD도 없고 경합장애도 없고 왜 이렇게 지랄해? 그러니까 엄마가 어렸을 때부터 니네 안 치우고 너 그 바이올린 연습하라고 앵간히 막 맨날 못하고 싶어. 그리고 너 우리 아이가 왜 이럴까 생각을 해보고 그때 연구했어요. 너가 맨날 그냥 혼내기만 하고 소리만 들려도 그래가지고 역학하는지 알지? ADHD니까 ADHD 그냥 공부 안 하겠다고 막 알기만 치고 막 지금 상관이 엄마 아빠한테 되게 거의 이게 NH이 엄마가 안 치고 엄마 지랄했어. 해가지고 여유가 없어 이제. 옛날에 엄마 지랄했을 때 그냥 조용히 있었다가 내가 너무 들었어. 지금 나 서울에서 서울 와가지고 엄마가 이지랄하는 거 부모를 좀 잡아줬어. 한 2주에 한 번만 들었지 그만두라고 잡아줬어 내가. 근데 엄마가 일을 많이 힘들어서 지랄하더라. 근데 지금 힘든 일도 없는데 지랄하니까 그냥 안 치는 거야. 지금 엄마 힘든 일도 없잖아. 야 엄마가 뭐? 엄마 지금 스트레스 때문에 지금 무슨 소리야? 나 너에 대한 스트레스가 없어. 나 가만히 냅두라는데 엄마가 그 말이야. 아니 근데 내가 너로 나가있어. 내가 가르칠 때 지금 아직까지 만나 그러니까 너가 무슨 말이 있잖아. 애들한테 나 왜 너무 좀 안 좋은 얘기냐 없어서 그냥 너에 대한 얘기 하지 말고 애들한테 치고 없대서 선생님이 치가 없대. 무슨 치가 없어. 그러니까 애들한테 물어봐. 너에 대한 내가 저기 엄마를 못하고 내가 너무 어렵고 불편하고 너 아까 그랬잖아. 근데 니네 그래 근데 사람들이 부정적인 사람 그 옆에 있는 게 너무 그래서 내가 싫어. 뭔가 이렇게 긍정적인 에너지인 사람한테는 나도 부정적인 했는데 나도 질문이 있지. 에너지 팔린데 이것도 그런데 이게 그 내가 중간에 있잖아. 근데 엄청 그러면 되게 모르겠어. 맨날 나한테 질문을 한 적이 없고 항상 모르겠다고 이거 무슨 따님만 얘기는 해. 그게 나 갑자기 저번 주에는 나 탈출이라고 그냥 심었거든. 실제로 추천한 말도 안 되는 그냥 왜? 왜 나쁜 그런 남자있어? 아니 이렇게 심었다. 잘 안 했다고. 주아에게 생각했으면 일반적으로 또 연락이 온 거야. 그래서 나한테 얼굴에 나 세상 왔는데 이랬어. 내가 설명 잡을까? 이러는 거야. 왜? 나 할 말이 있어. 할 말이 진짜 미치고 해야 돼. 또 걔 옛날에도 나 받는 것까지 얘기했어. 근데 그게 나를 밀어붙이거나 지혜를 못해가지고 근데 내가 사회를 가기 싫다고 하기는 그러고 제 생활을 못하고 문제가 안 보니까 아까 너 들어갈 때 내가 그러니까 이거는 스스로 지혜만 한 거야. 그래서 나한테 근데 이번에도 나 그때 2시간밖에 못 자고 들어가가지고 시간을 주는데 7시까지 와주셨거든. 근데 나 조절했어. 2시간 걸리다가 시간을 맞춘다. 뭐 그사람과 학교 와야 되게 싫대. 자기는 만나는 것도 얘기하고 너무 혹시 네 얘기만 하거든. 내 얘기를 들어보는 게 아니고 나랑 똑같아. 너무 치는 것 같아. 나도 누구 만나는 내 얘기만 할 때 내가 시간을 줬지만 내가 보니까 여기 뭐 싫대. 사람들이 왜 날 싫어하는지 알겠다. 내가 보니까 내가 그러니까 그래서 그렇게 LG도 한 가지 좀 서로 같이 치료다니는 그런 게 있어요. 현역센터 있잖아. 왜안 왔어? 이거 만들어서 하면 안 돼? 그것도 예산을 없애다가 상담사 문제 짓고 한번 제안해볼까? 그 정책 제안을 있는데 이거 내일 좋은 거 내가 선생님 내일 내가 좋아 유미 아무튼 근데 아버지 누군가에 그랬으니까 교회를 다니시고 이후에 미국에서 교회를 다니기 시작했고 이후에 이러다가 왜? 그랬더니 매일 결혼하고는 어제 일요일날 두 번째 거 그때 불문한 미팅이 며칠이니까 그러면은 1년 한 번씩 나와서 되는 시간을 그 8시간 버리는 거야. 그 시간까지 40분 때 제가 보면 이 기본이 그 예를 들어서 사실 또 가족 기록을 이런 걸 나눈다. 근데 그것도 매일 출근. 근데 나는 출근 이렇게 안 가잖아. 난 영어 얘기를 듣잖아. 난 영어 얘기를 출근 하니까 그런 스트레스를 그래 그냥 사람들 좀 하고 너무 귀엽다 근데 이분인데 얘는 그 혼자니까 혼자를 느끼잖아. 그리고 나이가 아니 그래도 30이야. 그러니까 아니 친구 비돌이지 막 공부는 친구를 가까워 그리고 맨날 공장에 친구들 막 지금 힘들어서 이렇게 쓰고 있는데 다른 애들은 다 직업도 말해주는 거 지금 다 사진도 나오고 지금 이런 애들만 그래 시즌은 좋은 그냥 집이 소중하고 아이들을 원래는 그냥 불편한 건강관리에 좀 집어다가 나 이렇게 키도 크고 예뻐야 되는 그냥 근데 이거 예쁘고 크고 지금 외고 그런 거 이거 이런 거 붙여되고 또 나만 붙이고 다른 애들과 약간 내용처럼 뭐 아니면 연애 중이다 하거나 그런 주제 중이다 이러면서 자기가 얼마나 보잘것 없는 인간인지 이렇게 비교가 돼서 인도에 있는데 근데 그걸 내가 지금 나도 인도하잖아. 난 그걸 애써 부정하고 있는데 나도 인도한데 근데 내가 다시 그래 걔랑 너랑 너가 더 나도 그래서는 내가 그렇지 내가 다시 뭐라고 그러니까
하이.
내가 그랬어. 나도 그 비교돼. 근데 힘들게 사는 사람 많아. 그럼 친구가 일주일이고 내 친구 그냥 시대 다니고 되는데 맨날 야간이라고 일주일이야. 근데 그 일주일에 공감이야. 오늘도 재밌는데 서울도 괜찮거든? 근데 집에 찌들어 있으니까 얘를 보면 불쌍해. 또 다른 하는데도 붙여가지고 또 혼나 안 찍거든. 근데 초에 조심해. 그리고 나 아무리 독서를 하고 있다. 눈이 작게 저하는 내가 못 자고 있는 건 훨씬 행복해. 그리고 나도 뭐 쓰레기 넘치고 못 나와가지고 연애도 내려고 일도 지금 돈이들고 나도 일을 찍었고 내가 아는 다른 애 보내고 백수야. 그래서 보내고 다 서로야. 우리 교회에 너가 필요한 사람들만 보냈던 거지. 너네 말 처음부터 얘기하고 붙이고 알바만 사주시려고 그냥 가르치고 다른 상황처럼 우리가 굉장히 많아. 우리 말을 생각하는 남자도 있고 그냥 너가 본인은 직업도 연애 잘하고 그런 한 희망 사람들이 누가 그 사람을 지내고 그렇다 이렇게 하지 옆에 있는 힘들게 사는 분들이 많은 거지. 그러니까 그걸 일을 듣고 준비해 하는 알바하는 게 같이 먹고 취준이 있고 그냥 그 하나는 말 안 하잖아. 맨날 취준을 못하니까 한 번 얘기하고 그냥 그걸 외우는 거지 사람들이. 그냥 성공한 사람들은 유니치랑 했어요. 뭐 여자친구랑 또 무슨 중이에요. 뭐 친구랑 같이 이런 좋은 얘기를 많이 해서 굉장히 말 많이 해서 내리는 거지. 힘들게 사는 애들 주위. 그래서 내가 야 그냥 돈만 가지고 끝도 없어. 나도 부모 그렇게 갖고 남는 남자가 있고 애들 행복하게 뒷담화지고 결혼하는 게 가치인데 하나님은 내 자리에서 나만의 은혜가 더해도 있다고 하셨잖아. 그러니 너가 그걸 처음 받았다면 그걸 살면서 처음 느끼는 기분이니까 아마 그럴 수 있겠어. 아마 또래니까 그거를 했겠지. 근데 내 생각은 너는 공부를 한거 같아. 내 취미가 알려고 그래서 그렇지. 그런 사람들 기도하려고 보는 게 막 그게야. 마음을 비우고 내가 기도하려는 기도 앞에 내가 심한 거 있을까? 나도 오르튼 있어서 너가 힘든 얘기하면 같이 쳐주니까 오르란 얘기는 목사님이 한 시간에는 내게 나랑 들어보는 얘기를 너무 힘들었으면 좋겠다. 너도 예전에 여기까지 부탁할 수 있어. 나도 그거 딱 들으면 어쩌라고 진짜 너무 힘든데 어쩌라고. 근데 나도 숨어있는 막 찌르는 그냥 들어보는 나눠가지고. 솔직히 막 우리 서로만 다른 행복으로 남은 분들이 있어요. 근데 엄마도 그런 분들에 대해서 많이 생각하고 사람들이 기술적인 게 그 엄마가 보기에 괜찮은 성적으로 밀리는 거 그리고 영양가 초등학생이야. 그러면 영양제가 앞으로 되게 여자 부모들이 필요한 거잖아. 아마 들어가는 거 없지. 근데 얘기들은 그 왕하고 비슷한 그런 건데 소개한 분이 있더라고. 그러면 소리가 근데 그때로 제가 그때 내가 그냥 그때로 생각했던 것 여자들 막하고 했는데 여자들 진짜 연락을 다 키 작고 좀 못생기고 우리 교회에도 그렇게 그러더라고. 그래가지고 안에 생각이 이런 근데 우리는 나이가 있어서 부모님들이 그런 뭐 아들 그런 우리 목사님들 하고 하고 부모님들하고 근데 그 아들은 그 요번에도 어디 갔으니까 되게 크죠. 그분이 분명 얘기해서 서울로 무식대로 들어가. 근데 그런 무섭지? 그러니까 그게 다 그래. 근데 엄마도 항상 너 그거 우울증 관련 구조되는 거가 어느 순간 이제 이들을 그렸어. 공부가 지금 하고 있는데 사랑으로 보시고 그래가지고 이렇게 그리고 공방 이렇게 하고 근데 예전에 그러니까 독립된 사이트 이러면 그리고 우리 엄마가 하는 게 보니까 징징징징 거는 사람은 그런 얘기 아주 징징징 근데 내가 좀 징징징 근데 이번에 이제 내가 몇 달 빠진 요번에 갔는데 이제 내가 이거 정리를 했어. 왜냐하면 나는 나보다 그 나은 사람들
보고 물어봤거든. 근데 지금은 그래 맞다. 안 들리는 사람도 있고 왜 하는 사람도 있어. 아무튼 근데 그 남편 또 내가 그랬어. 아니 지나가 도전도 앞으로 굉장히 보이고 엄마하고 엄마도 아닌데 왜 아닌데 아니라고 하니까 그건 엄마는 치마 엄마 애가 아니니까 치라니까 치 엄마 애는 공부만 해도 문제 해결은 치야 엄마 치마 근데 엄마가 더 싫어하는 얘기야 내가 요새 MBTI에서 직장 동안 그거랑 MBTI 있는 거 똑같은 일이 있을 때 치들을 무기방어 만들었어 치야 지금 몸이 안 된다고 나 몸이 안 된다고 해도 그러니까 이렇게 하는 거야 엄마 치라니까 랩스 코스야 아니 회사도 그렇게 얘기 안 하지 그냥 말했는데 그만이라도 돌리라고 말했으면 치라니까 그럼 치야 근데 너 이해가 안 하면 옛날에 굉장히 불러보는 거 같아 해 이거 내가 그렇게 일하는 거 아니 완전 공감해가지고 내가 거기에 몰입을 하고 근데 도희 엄마는 내가 엄마의 이러면 참 힘들어 예술까지 내면 안 되는 게 없어 내가 고등학교도 여기 가까운데 예전에 여기도 아니라 공부하고 아니 그러니까 내 말 잘 받아먹는 사람들은 왜 잘 되려나 근데 어쩌라고 남이 뭐 잘 듣는 말들은 그냥 나 엄마가 멍청하니까 엄마 주머니가 좀 바뀌는 거지 지가 똑똑같이 건강하게 살아야겠지 엄마 덕분에 잘 나가는 사람이라고 그냥 멍청한 사람 엄마 도와준다 그냥 엄마보다 멍청한 사람 엄마가 도와주고 거기에 잘한 사람 있고 엄마보다 잘한 사람한테 엄마 주문 안 듣잖아 엄마보다 다른 사람이 나한테 도움을 했을 때 뭐 나한테 어떻게 도움을 안 해주지 너는 해준 적 없어? 그래 엄마보다 잘한 사람이 지금 저렇게 유튜브가 모르는 거잖아 아니 그냥 나는 이렇게 배우내고 싶어 그럴 거야 이런 말 다 해줄 수 있지 그러니까 치우니까 이렇게 애프면 그런 거 하고 치면 그런 거 하고 치면 내가 왜 그럼 맨날 공사할 때 내가 드디어 오려니까 진짜 리스트에 있는 거 정말 막 뒤집어지는 거 그냥 그렇게 리스트에요 이거 애기가 안 하는데 어떻게 괜찮아질지 말해야 되지 그치? 문제 해결을 애프는 그거를 준비해 치는 문제 해결 나 이거 실컷 건강을 내일 몇 시요? 몇 시요? 아무튼 아치였지 아니 2시간에 50분 먹을 수 있으니까 그 전에 나와야지
2시 반에 나온다 했잖아
야 이거 미스코 먹을 거야?
아니?
그러면
줄 사람 있어?
뭐지? 그걸 못 샀어
줘 하면 6% 내가 왜 먹어 소고기인데 나 할머니도 이빨 안 좋지 않을까? 그냥 거기 가져가 추석에 그거 가져 뭐를 볼까? 뭐 볼지 고르는 것도 일이요. HBO 시리즈가 좋은데. 세상과 나 사이.
야, 이거 왔어.
뭐야?
이거.
아, 애들 거 책 다 주문한 건 아니고 몇몇 것만 주문한 거.
뭐 할 거 없네. 뜯어서 주면 되겠다.
어. 미리 주문하는 거야, 걔네 거. Not so pretty? 아, 너 냅둬! 고쳐보는 게 아니라, 좀 냅둬! 냅둬, 무서워? 혼자 옆에 주려고. 엄마가 혼자야? 이거 고치고 뭐 사냐고. 혼자, 엄마가 혼자. 내가 고쳐보자 싶어서 내가 고쳐줄게? 내가 아침에 들어. 아니, 고쳐보자 이러는 거 엄마가 주시는 거고 내가 고쳐지고 싶어. 그래, 해보자 이게 아니라 나는 나좀 냅둬 이러는데 고쳐보자 이러는 거고 고쳐보고 싶은 생각이 안 들어? 안 들어. 응, 난 지금 행복해. 아니, 힘든 거지. 다른 애들도 회사 다니면서 맨날 회사 족같다 그러고 상사 족같다 그러고 일 힘들다고 다 그래. 교회 애들도. 나도 일 힘들다고 하는데 계속 다니잖아. 때려쳤냐 내가? 폭탄 테러 다큐 봐야겠다. 예. 원래 커피가 너무 쓰다. 꿀을 넣는 듯.
Every April night, I remember exactly what I was doing that morning. Who's in that tray? Please. I remember exactly what I was doing that morning. Who's in that tray? What's on my back? My grandchildren, Chase and Colton, I went in and flipped the light on in their bedroom. And I sang good morning to you, good morning to you. We're all in our places with sunshine and faces. What a nice way to start a new Wednesday. And Chase against the big old I remember when I left him at the daycare. What did I want to do? They're in the federal building. The little donut crumbs that were on their faces. Then, at 9:02,
Part of the building has been blown away. They'll have to be inside so I can get a better view of it.
It felt to me like my skin was burning off. It was very hot, and it was a wind so powerful that it felt like it pinned my hair back.
I heard a very loud explosion, and I noticed the plume of smoke coming up from downtown Oklahoma City. So I ran back in the house and turned on the TV. That's where my daughter played her book. And as we made our way closer to the building, I said, my daughter is dead.
Because you work on the first floor. And of course, the first floor has no deaths.
April 19th, my dad had an appointment to go down to the Social Security building that morning. I knew my mom went down with him. The news started to come in, there's been a bomb. When they said the Social Security building, I mean, everything at that moment just stopped.
Part of the capital city, Carroll has been exploded. The governor has had a report that 6 children were killed in a daycare center.
Oh.
I said to my daughter, to Edie, the baby, and we take off running to the north side of the building, and the building's gone. My son was an off-duty station officer. He saw his mom and his sister on TV. He knew something was wrong.
I looked up at the TV and I saw my mom and my sister touching each other. And my sister was screaming, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" Upon arrival at the site, my partner and I went into the rubble. I went to the back side of the building, which would be on the side of the daycare center. They had about 10 to 12 children laid out on a piece of concrete slab, and they were just laid one next to the other, and it's the very end to the right. Simple. You know, I knew that'd be the last time I saw my nephew. And I asked a state law enforcement officer that was there if I could reach down and hug him and kiss him goodbye. And he told me, this is a crime scene. Do not touch the evidence.
Of all the sad stories in Oklahoma City today, the most heartbreaking may be the story of the children who were in the daycare center when the bomb exploded. What is your overwhelming emotion as you face this horrendous tragedy in your family?
Those babies were just like mine, and I loved them. And anybody can understand the loss of a child. If you then have to watch your child grieve over the loss of those children, it's devastating.
Edie, are you confident that the people behind this will be caught?
I don't know. I hope so. I don't know.
As a young reporter, I used to cover Oklahoma City streets. There's really nothing more exciting than a car crash.
You know, everyone at NBC News knew I was an Okie because I always bragged about the fact that I was. So there was no doubt who they were going to send. When I got to the side of the federal building, I thought, this can't be the place where I live, Oklahoma City. It reminded me of Beirut. Brought back memories of the Marine barracks and the embassy bombing and other terrorist attacks that I covered. And I said, this is Oklahoma. This can't happen here.
U.S. government sources told CBS News that Middle East terrorism will be all over it.
You know, everyone was thinking of terrorism because there had been an attempt to bomb the World Trade Center. And the bombers, they were from the Middle East. But I went to NBC and said, let me put together a team for the
손소리 개 무서워.
The first person I thought of, Bob Sands.
I had this friend, and he had done some work for some far-right people in Duncan. So I said, just check the boards and see what the pattern is. About an hour later, he called me and said, you're not going to believe it. You need to come in. People were just going ape in the far-right, the militia movement, saying, who did this? What's that all about? That's awesome. I would just ask that you and the American people not rush to any conclusions unsupported by known evidence, and that we give the investigators the space they need to do their job. My initial reaction was, first of all, try to get everybody to calm down and not react with their words. I didn't want to stir whatever was going on up anymore. And everyone immediately assumed that it was a Muslim extremist attack. And I wasn't so sure. My native state was almost like honey for bees to attract a lot of these extremist groups, and they moved in and out of there. When Oklahoma City happened, my life and experience told me that there was a very good chance that this was a homegrown plot.
On the drive up there, there's a lot of things going on. So you got to command a major bombing investigation, and you're thinking of all the things you have to do. And I'm thinking, hey, when I came here, okay, I just file it away. I get a call from a reporter, and she said, is this Middle Eastern?
아,
그 다음에 갔다 와서 이제 아빠가 잡채사니까 어디 저번처럼 뭐 먹으러 가자 그러거든. 안 먹어.
나 아빠랑 대화도 안 하고.
어때? 엄마 가자.
나도 가래?
같이 가자.
아니 아빠가 말했어?
같이 가는 거지 당연히. 그리고 ADHD는 집에 있는 것보다 여행을 자꾸 다녀야 돼. 머리 이렇게 회시하고. 네. 아, 하루 뭔 줄 알아? 알았지?
아빠가 뭐라 그러는데?
아니 그냥 엄마한테 하고 저녁 안에 바람 쐬러 가자고 그랬거든.
근데 나랑 대화 안 하는 거에 대해서
야,
뭐라
안
그래?
하는 거 어차피 저 안 하잖아. 뒤에 앉아있으면 되지. 알겠지? 이거 이렇게
I said, no, that was April 19th. 2 years earlier. April 19th was the siege in Lincoln. And I thought we were seeing the result of that anger against actions on the part of the government. My thought is it's going to be done.
That day, it was overwhelming to first go to the crime scene. Secret Service, IRS, ATF, multiple federal agencies were housed in that building. I was walking approximately a block and a half from the bomb scene. There were 2 FBI agents and a sheriff looking at this rear axle of a truck. They believed it had come from the truck responsible for the bombing. And they were removing the VIN number from the rear axle. And I told them to guard that with your life. That's probably going to be the most important piece of evidence we have in this entire investigation. We learned that particular truck had been rented 3 or 4 days before in Junction City, Kansas. The person who rented it went by the name of Robert Kling, and he used the birthday of April 19th. We learned that particular truck had been rented 3 or 4 days before in Junction City, Kansas. And I told him to guard that with your life. That's probably going to be the most important piece of evidence. That we have in this entire investigation. We learned that particular truck had been rented 3 or 4 days before in Junction City, Kansas. The person who rented it went by the name of Robert Kling. Learned that particular. Truck had been rented 3 or 4 days before in Junction City, Kansas. The person who rented it went by the name of Robert Kling, and he used the birthday of April 19th. The mechanic that was working there probably was Robert Kling, and he used the birthday of April 19th. probably had the best recollection of what he looked like. Also, he had a recollection of a person he thought had been with him, commonly called John Doe number 2.
He's got agents all over the country, primarily out I-35 on north and south of the United States. They went to a place called the Green Lamp Hotel, interviewed the owner, showed pictures, and he was just
A very nice young man, basically. That's very shocking to think somebody has such a deprived mind.
We got the registration information. His name was Timothy McVeigh. That an agent runs the name, Timothy McVeigh, and he gets a hit. He says, boss, you're not going to believe this bullshit, but Timothy McVeigh is in custody. He had been arrested an hour and a half after the bombing in Perry, Oklahoma.
Here he is in his junker getaway car driving away from the scene of
After the bombing in Perry, Oklahoma.
Here he is in his junker getaway car driving away from the scene of the crime. And he gets on the thruway and he thinks he's gotten away with it. It turns out that McVeigh was missing a license plate from his vehicle. And the troopers start questioning McVeigh. He ascertains that McVeigh is carrying an unregistered handgun. He arrests McVeigh. McVeigh was wearing a T-shirt celebrating the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And it always has astonished me that nobody put these two things together at the time. But for 2 full days, they had no idea that he was involved with the bombing. And they were getting close to letting him go.
It's just hard to believe. You think, it's going to be a nationwide search, and now you're told that he's roughly 70 miles away.
I said, call him, don't let that boy out. And you can imagine my phone ringing off my bell. I mean, the Attorney General's calling, the Director of the FBI is calling me, get him out of there. Well, I was concerned about arresting him or attempt to kill him. And I didn't want to be the man who says McVeigh under custody got him killed. That's not good. I'd be working until they could.
He was captured about 30 miles from where I grew up. And I thought it was for. Because I didn't want to believe in Americans. They marched Timothy McVeigh out of that jail. This is an American doing this to Americans.
I'm a little surprised that it was an American. I drew a conclusion pretty quick that this was payback for Waco and the kids that were killed there. You killed our kids, we're going to kill your kids.
When I saw him on television, I felt like I'd seen him in the building before. I remember being in the elevator, and 2 men got on the elevator, and one of them was McVeigh. I always wondered if that was real or if I imagined that with everything else going on.
Yeah, the mornings get to them. And my thought was, hope somebody make it right and just get him off it. And I really wish that.
You're looking for the monster, and you finally get that day to see him, and you're thinking like, wait a minute, is this him? He looks like anyone's kid. Just your normal, average Joe.
He's got this look in his eyes. I believe that in his mind, he wanted to look out of the crowd and right straight into the camera and go, it's goddamn right I did it. You're cowards if you don't do the same thing.
way, the first confirmed arrest still comes from the case. After that McVeigh testimony, I had McVeigh's father phone up and said, I asked him, you know your son, who would be involved in this? He said, Terry Nichols and Michael Porter. Like that. We learned that he had been in basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, with a couple of guys named Terry Nichols and Michael Porter. Terry Nichols was older, but they struck up a friendship based on their political beliefs. We then learned that Terry Nichols is now living in Kansas. At his residence, we find the remnants of fertilizer that was used in the bombing itself. But one of the biggest and most important pieces of information is a telephone card sold by a right-wing group called Spotlight. We pretty much were able to trace where they had been throughout the United States through that calling card. We find that Michael Porter is now living in Arizona.
I think people are looking right now for some little pain. Now it may feel like there's nobody on this earth that is in any way supportive of him. But there is. There is. Everybody should be supportive of him because he's an innocent man.
I interviewed Michael Fortier. I said to him, I need your help. And he said, you don't understand, we're at war. I said, I'd have killed you today. I'd have killed you now. We're at war. I'd have killed your buddies. We're not. You may be at war with your country. Your country's not at war with you.
I do not believe that Sam blew up any building in Oklahoma.
Then he said to me, it's about the Constitution. I said, you're right. It is about the Constitution. Let me tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to indict you under the Constitution. I'm going to convict you under the Constitution. We're going to handle your appeals under the Constitution. And sooner or later, somebody's going to put you on a gurney, stick a needle in your arm. We're going to kill you. Now, you better decide. You're on my side and my side.
Later on, after McVeigh had been charged, his attorney, black reporters, meet with McVeigh one-on-one. The ground rule is, this is not an interview. This is kind of a get-to-know you. I had covered the First World War. I knew he had been a veteran of it. And we started talking about the Gulf War, and it kind of lit up because it was something that he could talk about, that he felt proud of, that he had participated in. And then I shifted the conversation to his feelings about the U.S. government. And I could see a light switch go off. And he went cold. And you could see the anger well. And I thought at that point, this guy for sure did it.
When Tim was identified, I just started delving into the far right. I went to Little Rock, Arkansas, and did a whole lot of research there because back in those days, you had to go actually look at hard paper. Turns out, way back in 1983, this virulent racist by the name of Richard Lynch had decided that he wanted to blow up the Upper Piedmont federal building in Oklahoma City. This virulent racist by the name of Richard Lynch had decided that he wanted to blow up the Upper Piedmont federal building in Oklahoma City. I was stoned to find out that the far-right movement wanted to blow up the Murphy. Well, how come the Upper Piedmont federal building in Oklahoma City? I was stoned to find out that the far-right movement wanted to blow up the Murphy. Well, how come we never heard about that federal building in Oklahoma City? I was stoned to find out that the far-right movement wanted to blow up the Murrah building. Well, how come we never heard about that before?
Pro-gun patriotism is becoming more and more popular among economically hard-pressed farmers. Traditionally strong, proud, independent farmers are losing their farms in record numbers.
We think as many as 1 million family farms were foreclosed on during the late 70s and early 80s. There was anger against the federal government's exploitation of farmers.
Violence starts to occur in the heartland because they were desperate. When Mr. Nixon was president, he encouraged farmers to plant fence row to fence row, and they did. But then, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, President Carter put an embargo on grain sales to the Soviet Union. The result was agricultural depression.
The federal government must shirk its responsibility to help undo some of the damage that it created. They're doing a great deal to help farmers. The federal government will not bail out every farmer hopelessly in debt. So today, I have vetoed this massive new bailout.
Ronald Reagan basically let farmers just go bankrupt. Far-right leaders saw political opportunity. The first wave of the Patriot movement was able to successfully mobilize farmers into this far-right movement. They were willing to take up arms, and some of them did.
Everybody in the movement saw the land crisis, farm crisis, as the government and major corporations putting farmers into a financial bind. The government is making war with the American people and selling us out.
I don't want to see our group or any group forced against their will into a confrontation.
I'm a former extremist from a group known as CSA, the Covenant, the Sword and the Arm of the Lord, in northern Arkansas back in the 70s and 80s. For me, it was like heaven on earth. The group was started originally by Jim Ellison to establish a community based upon the apocalypse.
God began to deal with us about the economic judgment, collapse, and upheaval that was coming upon all the world, especially on this country.
And he said, but how are you going to protect yourself when it collapses and bad people want what you have?
Basically, the Bible says that we have the right to use whatever the enemy uses. And the enemy, of course, is going to have guns.
We had never talked about this before. We never talked about defense. Over the next 18 months, we started buying guns, buying military equipment, and we've done so well that the magazine in those days called us the number one selling SWAT team in the United States. The church kind of went to the background. Guns and warfare went to the forefront. The first plan that we talked about was the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Sort of quasi-member of the group, Richard Wayne Snell. He lived in Oklahoma. He was having trouble with the IRS. Him and him went and cased the Murrah Building. There was a lot of federal officers in that building, so it seemed like a good target for various agencies in that building. So we had our munitions guys start to develop a rocket launcher. It seemed like a good target for various agencies in that building. So we had our munitions guys start to develop a rocket launcher, and all the rockets would be shot at the same time toward the Murrah Building. One of the missiles exploded in the guy's hands that was building them, scarred his hands real bad. So we took that as an assignment from God that we weren't supposed to do that particular plan.
I was surprised as to the extent of violence of this group, believing that they were going to cause the collapse of the United States of America and that they were going to help create that collapse. We actually learned that Richard Wayne Snell, a member of the CSA, shot and killed a pawn shop owner in Texarkana, believing he was Jewish, had killed Lewis Bryan, a state police trooper, murdered, I believe that was in '84.
Got out of my van, and I shot Officer Bryan twice from the hip.
The death of Trooper Lewis Bryant was especially heartbreaking for Bill Clinton. While the governor was visibly shaken over the slaying, he was also angry.
You know, they don't have a right to go around carrying weapons and taking the law in their hands and acting as if they're somehow playing God.
Snell got the death penalty. Snell's execution was to be on the night of April 19th, 1995, which happened to be the day the Oklahoma City Federal Building got bombed. In the movement, April 19th, of course, is what's called Patriots Day. First shot fired during the American Revolution. Very special for the whole movement. Jim told me one time, he said, I will go down in history in the Second American Revolution. 84, told Jim, I said, so you really want all this to start? He said, yes. So build a bomb and we'll start the war. So he decided to go to find a good place to do the bomb. We found the church.
빨 거야?
We sort of had this stereotype image in our heads that there was just going to be this sexual orgy, which of course it wasn't. Start seeing people lift their hands up, lift their eyes up, look up and start worshiping. And I identified with them. So instantly they ceased being homosexual and not anything. And I couldn't pay attention. Later, I'm done with that. Boy, I want to, I can't handle it. And the Lord spoke to me and said, you can't do it.
Looks like a battle zone. Police and federal agents blockading the road, surrounding the heavily armed compound of a white supremacist, calling itself the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord. They want to arrest the leader, James Ellison, on an illegal weapons charge.
Call the sword the arm of the Lord. They live in log cabins.
더
Every
빨아야 돼.
log cabin had a trap.
이거 봐봐. 살 거지? 근데 초록색은 몇 시간밖에 안 걸어서 왔어. 따로 헐 익었잖아. 몇 시간밖에 안 익었다고? 응. 그럼 이따가 입어. 나 순서대로 오늘 편한 거 드릴게. 뭐라고? 오늘 순서대로 편한 거 드릴 거야. 그리고 빨게. 아니 그거 무게를. 잠깐 튀어봐. 너무 많아, 진짜. 요거도 있어. 머리 여기서 말렸어. 너 사실 세다. 잘했어. 여기 있는 건 뭐야? 여기.
떨어
많은 거야.
안 빠른 거. 떨어져.
근데 여기잖아.
여기 위에서 떨어지고.
근데 더러운 것지가 아닌데 한번 봐봐.
빠른 거 아니라고 했어. 여기 위에서 떨어져.
거기다 넣어놔.
아니 중간이 없어.
떨어지지 말아. 마음이 웃긴다.
떨어진 거야 떨어진.
When you go up to the trap door, you will have spot code with your weapon and ammunition level. The federal officials, they really understand this concept. We knew that a drone star, a
I was going to kill people. And I didn't do it. I don't want to do it. And I didn't want to get in a shootout. They had murder on their mind, and they were all doing it for God. I found somebody that actually came to me. Very noble.
You see,
그 바지 한 번밖에 안 입었어.
we are not going to shoot them. We don't want to kill anyone. But if y'all shoot first, I've got a Huey helicopter. It's going to come up, it's got a 50 caliber machine gun, and start shooting holes and all of it. In 30 seconds, every man, woman, child, and the concrete. So for 4 days, I went back and forth, up and down for the game. Finally, on the 4th day, they got real late. They justify his mind. I was perfect. Yeah, so we good job there. And then, what's he doing? So I'm placing you under arrest, but I'm not going to handcuff you right now. I would not want to be handcuffed in front of mine. I'm just falling.
The 4-day siege ended as quietly as it began. The FBI got more than it bargained for. Other weapons found at the camp read like an arsenal pet drawer. Hand grenade casings, blasting pens, dynamite, and various handguns.
We found cyanide in huge barrels. Still got poison water.
In addition to the arrest of CSA leader James Ellis by federal and state authorities,
Jim ended up taking a plea bargain on the weapons charges. So I got arrested, ended up plea bargaining, 5-year sentence. My dream for moving there had turned into a nightmare. But the movement continued to grow.
The White Power movement had come together every summer at the Aryan Nations World Congress.
Continued to grow.
The White Power movement had come together every summer at the Aryan Nations World Congress in Hayden Lake, Idaho. In 1983, the movement adopted a number of key strategies, and it decided to declare war on the federal government.
There is nothing more that the white Aryan can do but obey the commandment of Yahweh his God and separate himself. The founding fathers gave their blood into this country, and it's true
They thought mainstream politics could never, ever deliver the kinds of social changes they wanted. In the 80s, there is a major campaign of violence and crime carried out by this movement across the United States. Robbing of bars, bombing of movie theaters, assassination.
Last night, Alan Burke was killed in Amherst, arriving at his Denver home. 10.45 caliber shell casings were
free. By 1987, the government believes it has a case that all of this activity represents an organized criminal conspiracy to overthrow the United States government.
Charges of sedition were filed against Reverend Butler and others. In its opening statement, the government said it intends to prove that 10 of the defendants plotted to overthrow the government by force.
Seditious conspiracy is a hard charge to prove. Prosecutors have to show that they intended to overthrow the U.S. government and had the capacity to do so.
What the FBI now sees across the country is a national network of neo-Nazis and white supremacist groups whose goal is to purge the country of blacks, Jews, and other minorities.
One, I want to praise Yahweh's holy and precious name. Two, I want to say to hell with the federal government.
Louis Beam is really the intellectual architect of leaderless resistance. And I think this has been the biggest legacy of the white power movement and the reason it's been with us since 1983. Activists can work violently in common cause without direct communication with leaders. There are still leaders in leaderless resistance, but they're not culpable because you can't trace them to the individual violent action.
I understood that that was their intent, but I also knew that an Arkansas jury would have a hard time convicting these folks of attempted overthrow of the United States government when they had no capacity really to do that.
That's why it's called a conspiracy. The thought was trying to government actually couldn't do it, but it certainly tried.
The government had really bet the farm on this trial. They had used all of these other busts to kind of amass state's witnesses, and it failed spectacularly.
It was the first serious setback in the federal government's war against suspected white supremacist groups. 13 defendants were found not guilty of all charges, which included murder, robbery, and conspiracy to overthrow the government.
It was a tremendous defeat for the government. It totally enabled the far right. We're free to go do whatever we want to do. They tried, they missed, we have got them by the shoulders.
She was being passed out and had to be carried off by her husband, who now owns her.
Leader of the resistance was Louis Speed. He passed it along. Everybody else, the best way to go after the government was not to have this organized CSA compound, but to have individuals, which less force to turn them along the road.
The practice groups have crossed the border into the West. It was the case in the 1930s. We see Saddam Hussein, an aggressive dictator, threatening his neighbors.
In our history of extremist movements in the United States, the most consistent correlation with fight is the aftermath of contact. Louis understood this veteran connection very, very well. He did this very specifically, going to military bases, recruiting active duty troops, recruiting veterans. These groups moved from, the white robe and hood to camouflage fatigues, able to take in a new generation of veterans coming home. Most notably, Timothy McVeigh.
Tim McVeigh came from a family that was literally the salt of the earth. They had come over in the 19th century to help with the canal and earned enough money to buy some farmland. You had the dawn of the automobile and Harrison radiator, the sprawling plant where as many as 8,000 people worked at one time, and that was the world that Bill McVeigh was offering to his son. All four houses we lived in, we always had a pretty good sized yard. We had a pool there. Sometimes in the summer when I come home from work and there'd be 15 kids in the pool. Family right next door at McDermott, they had a daughter the same age as Jennifer, Molly. They were good everyday neighbors.
He would play with us, he would babysit us, he took us trick-or-treating, and though I've known his family forever, I'm sure that the divorce with his parents was hard. When the split occurred, he chose to stay with his dad.
There was nobody that McVeigh loved or admired more than his grandfather, S. McVeigh. He taught Tim McVeigh all about proper handling of guns, how to use guns. I think he equated guns with his beloved grandfather.
Tim McVeigh's father worked at a GM plant for 30 years. Tim McVeigh's grandfather worked in the same plant for 30 years. By the time McVeigh came along, that plant was shrinking almost to non-existent. The industrial decline of the Buffalo area was a formative influence on McVeigh. At the same time, Terry Nichols was growing up on a small, struggling farm in the thumb of Michigan. And the farm crisis was making it harder and harder for farmers like him to survive. So McVeigh and Nichols represent the crisis in American agriculture and the crisis in American industry to an almost perfect degree.
I don't know when the idea to go into the military really came, but the first time I even sensed him seeming different is after his time over during the Gulf War.
The bombing in Iraq began 24 hours ago. It is still going on.
At Fort Benning, Terry Nichols became one of McVeigh's best friends. He was very influential in McVeigh's views of politics. McVeigh became close to Michael Fortier, who had smoked dope when he was out on patrol. And one of the very first experiences McVeigh had after joining the Army, these drill sergeants, they would scream things like, kill, kill, kill. McVeigh became a very skilled sharpshooter, Bradley military vehicle.
One instance, he spotted 2 Iraqi soldiers, brought them into his sight. He said all he saw was a red mist. He's proud of his kill. He got a Bronze Star for it. But as this very short war progressed, he saw the carnage from all of the bombs that had been dropped. It was overkill to him.
This one of the men was trying to talk the Iraqis into surrendering. There are a group of men, Iraqis with a life-carrying white flag. Over there, a large number of Iraqi tanks.
I've been in a lot of wars, combat affect different people differently. I think what goes on, a lot of people who leave war, is that they had a purpose. And the purpose in Desert Storm was to take back Kuwait and defeat Saddam Hussein. That was a huge purpose, a huge global purpose. Then you come back home and you have trouble finding a job, and you start getting discouraged.
Tim McVeigh and myself, we both have that title, veterans. We spend 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of our life serving our nation. Then when you get out of the military, you come back to the United States, and everyone's telling you that you're wrong, and you shouldn't be killing people, and you shouldn't be at war.
Started to demonstrated with a lot of students against the Gulf War. And the results of that war was actually the very thing causing her death. Because Tim McVeigh served in the Gulf War and PTSD. Those soldiers saw the Iraqis get shot in the back and saw tanks that actually buried some Iraqis soldiers alive. They saw all that angry stuff in the angry young men.
After the war, McVeigh went to this Green Beret tryout. He failed in his tryout to become a Green Beret. That was a demoralizing thing. I think if he had succeeded and been selected as a Green Beret, he probably would have been a great killing machine for the U.S. government.
He comes home and he has a nervous breakdown. He went over to his grandfather's house in February, a few months after he'd been out of the military, in a pair of sweatpants and just socks, no shirt. And Ed McVeigh opened the front door and said, Timmy, what's going on here? He says, I don't know, Grandpa.
Having PTSD, I think, helps to explain maybe the vulnerability that Richard lives in his car, he sleeps in his car, he would listen to right-wing radio, go from gun show to gun show. He was operating as sort of a straw buyer. He was buying guns for people who didn't want any kind of record or even name associated with buying guns. And he knew that these people were part of the insurgency. Not just selling weapons, they're selling ideology.
I'm William Pierce, and I'll be reading my book, The Turner Diary, to you. Listen carefully. How it shamed us. All that brave talk by patriots. The government will never take my guns away, and then nothing but meek submission when it happens.
Timothy McVeigh used this book as a Bible. Both the Turner Diaries and McVeigh targeted a federal building that had federal law enforcement agents in it. Both used a truck bomb. Both used a mixture of fuel oil and ammonium nitrate fertilizer. The one that strikes me the most eerie is the fact that the bomb that explodes and blows up the FBI building in the Turner Diary went off at 9:15 a.m. The bomb in Oklahoma City went off at 9:02.
He's got his Turner Diaries rolling in the back of his head, his love of guns. We find these videos about things like Ruby Ridge.
Randy Weaver, a fugitive on a federal firearms charge, has been holed up in a cabin near Naples for more than a year.
Ruby Ridge came about because of shady dealings by the federal government. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agents were trying to recruit Randy Weaver to be an informant on the militia movement by having another informant sell him a shotgun as a quarter of an inch shy of the legal limit. That looks a lot like entrapment.
With the sudden appearance of military hardware, it's one man stand against the law is suddenly taking on the appearance of a full-blown war. Special agent has been shot and killed.
Randy Weaver, 15-year-old son, died during the initial shootout.
Simple Marshall shot my son, stamped from the back, and killed him. He was running home today. His last words were, "I'm coming, Dad."
The FBI adopted military rules of engagement at Ruby Ridge. The day after Randy was shot, the sniper fired at Randy. The bullet into the canvas and hit by Vicky Weaver in the head and killed him. Later, an investigation was done, and the Department of Justice settled for $3.1 million for unlawful death of Sammy Weaver and Vicky Weaver.
We've just gotten an update now from federal authorities.
Randy's in good health. Unfortunately, Vicky is dead.
First time the federal game for Randy Weaver. Next time they'll stop for you.
After Ruby Ridge, McVeigh was on an odyssey to nowhere for about 2 years. His ideas would just be turned over in his head again and again.
His car was an old Chevy. He nicknamed it the Road Warrior. He reconnects with his Army buddies, Michael Fournier and Terry Nichols. There's a lot of alone time. He's manufacturing his argument of why he hates the government.
It may not be popular in West Virginia or Arkansas, where half the people have a hunting or a fishing license or both, but I think we ought to pass the Brady Bill and require a waiting period before people can get a handgun.
I felt that if it was ever going to be done, I was in the best position because I grew up in Arkansas, had a 22 when I was 10, I had a 410 shotgun when I was 14. You know, I grew up in the culture.
There's really only one thing you need to know. The Democrats want to do away with Second Amendment. They want to end up registering every gun and its owner in this country.
Some people forget that Tim McVeigh was that way. He was handing out pamphlets, he was hearing copies from his diaries, talking to people, and
If you're a true Christian, and you believe the truth, and you know the truth will set you free. A group called the Branch Davidians. It's an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. about 100 people, headed up by a gentleman by the name of David Correa. He predicted the end of the world was near, that he was the second coming of Jesus Christ. The apocalypse was going to happen, and it was going to start there with a battle on the plains of Texas.
You have guns?
It makes nobody's business whether we have a gun or not at this place. The ATF had information that there were automatic weapons, they had grenades there, and as a result, they were going to launch an attack on the French Davidian compound.
See my battery, Scott. See my battery behind the bus. Yeah. The ATF wanted to conduct a paramilitary raid. They had multiple opportunities to arrest David Corey. He jogged up and down Dublin Ranch Road right in front of the surveillance cameras. They could have grabbed him then. They didn't want to arrest him. They wanted a big show. Backfired on them.
The ATF fired the first shot, shooting the dogs that were outside guarding the property. And then it erupted into gunfire. ATF was immediately pinned down. 4 of their agents were killed. 16 were wounded. 5 Davidians were killed that day. The Attorney General says that FBI should take over and try to get this thing resolved. I was dispatched down there to do the press conferences. So for dealing with people who are very committed to what they're doing. And we ended up spending 51 days there.
I actually came here about 3 weeks into the standoff. They wouldn't let anybody closer than, say, maybe a mile from here. They had cordoned it off. A lot of the people who showed up were far-right patriots. They weren't aligned with, say, Davidian religious beliefs or sentiments.
You have attempted to cover up the FBI and ATF crimes here.
It was already taking place, that co-optation of Waco for the far-right patriot movement.
Waco is not a white power community. It is a multiracial community. The white power movement doesn't care about that very much. And the compound itself, because this goes on for so long, becomes a site where white power activists can organize and talk to each other. McVeigh traveled to the Waco site.
Somebody told me a lot of people are scared for Tim said to me, the government is at war with us. And he kept talking about this war, and I wasn't even privy to this narrative, the story. So I asked him to explain it to me. And he tells me that in the early 80s, the Reagan administration pushes for a military role in drug enforcement. We waged a good fight. The military forces have dramatically reduced drug use by 67%. In order for civilian law enforcement to get military support, they have to show the drug use. At Waco, the ATF manufactured the drug nexus that wasn't there. They claimed that French had been set in that lab. All those helicopters were flooded to the fortress.
This day 23 of the punk standoff with federal authorities were waiting about it. So they just assumed all day long reinforcements were brought in from a following of 4 hoods.
I think the ATF saw political opportunity in the election of Bill Clinton, who ran on gun control, to expand its operation and expand its reputation.
I was really torn by Waco. FBI kept pushing for action, and they acted like this would be, not too difficult to do. And I got it, but I mean, the truth is they were frustrated by being defied. Sometimes the right strategy is to wait. And I told them the story where we lived at the covenant and swore to honor the Lord in Arkansas. But they countered, and this is what really mattered for Janet Reno, which the Prospect Coalition, his inner circle, were abusing women and children. Finally, I told them they should go look at the record of what we did, but I would leave the decision up to them, and if they decided to do it, I would support them.
In Waco, Texas, the FBI has moved to a new and more active phase. An armored vehicle began punching holes. They are filling the compound with tear gas.
A little bit after noon, they ended up setting fire to the entire compound.
Here's another angle. You can see the black smoke behind us. It's horrible.
Yeah, I was told by headquarters I had to go back and do a final press conference. To get it so specific. There's nobody left.
I have been asked to read a statement from the director of the FBI.
I was trying to comfort people. I could see it all collapse.
McVeigh is standing in the parlor of his old farmhouse in Nichols, watching this live image of Waco burning, and tears are running down his eyes. And he's also thinking about his experience in the U.S. Army.
It really bothered McVeigh that the same Bradley fighting vehicles that he had fought in the Persian War were being used against the people of Waco. That was the turning point for McVeigh. He said in that very moment, he decided he was going to commit an act of terrorism. Very moment before were being used against the people of Waco. That was the turning point for McVeigh. He said in that very moment, he decided he was going to commit an act of terrorism.
After the ridge in Waco, we had this mass mobilization of militias. This thing just really explodes.
The critical issue he's obsessed with the idea. The Democratic Party and Bill Clinton were scheming to take away Americans' right to vote.
McVeigh told a lot of people that he was just furious at me. He really hated assault weapons.
It was the assault weapons thing, just as much as Waco and Ruby Ridge, that motivated McVeigh to bomb Pearl.
We will finally ban these assault weapons from our streets that have no purpose other than to kill. McVeigh charged from one end of the country to the other. Finally decided to build the bomb after months of buying 50-pound bags of ammonium nitrate, seed stores across the Midwest, buying racing car fuel down the line. McVeigh charged from one end of the country to the other. Finally decided to build the bomb after months of buying 50-pound bags of ammonium nitrate, seed stores across the Midwest, buying racing car fuel down in Texas. Ping pong back and forth from Kingman, Arizona, to Decker, Michigan, to Buffalo, New York.
They told us Nichols Sports really helped me. That I was the driving force, and all this was my plan, it was my crime. He came up with an action plan.
In Kansas, that's the way, the day before the bombing, with some coercion to get Terry Nichols there, they build the bomb.
They said Nichols got cold feet, and they threatened him. That's why he went along with it.
April 19th, gets back on the interstate and travels alone.
The enemy has many, many resources and assets at their disposal. The best thing we have here is you.
they told us that, like, the Death Star in Star Wars, he said there were all kinds of people in that Death Star who were just like secretaries and weren't leaders. They were killed too, but people all applauded when the Death Star blew up. But yes, innocent people had to die, but that's the way it goes.
Also collateral damage.
People had to die, but that's the way it goes.
Call them collateral damage.
I've been appointed for representation. I think I said I'm from East Oklahoma. He shook my hand and said, I heard you were coming. He explained very candidly why he did what he was accused of. He exhibited some pride in that he had managed to carry it off. He wanted a defense based on necessity. Said, I had to do it because they were going to kill other American citizens that had to be brought over. And I said, well, tell me why it was necessary to kill children under the age of 6. He said, no little children of 6. I said, well, that may be true, but that's not an explanation of the necessity. What that is revenge. After that wouldn't go anywhere. What I was trying to do was a reasonable doubt. We could argue to the jury the government hasn't proven it. I'm hopeful that no one will embarrass the state of Oklahoma by doing anything to any party in this case which will turn us into a three-way circle. Couldn't be seen as a show trial. Had to be seen as lawyers vigorously represent. My opposite number was Merrick Garland. He's been detained without bond.
It's important to recognize how America structured the criminal investigation trial of Nixon.
Testified that the cause of the explosion at the Murrah building was a bomb that was placed inside a Ryder truck.
He had a prosecutor in the sense that he wanted to keep the trial narrow and focused and limited to what was needed to make the case against First and Day and then Nixon.
No, I'm sorry. I really have to limit myself to what happened in the hearing today.
I'm not religious, but I did feel during that period of time that, oh, this is why I'm here. I mean, I really felt like I was doing something that mattered in order to obtain it.
On April 19, 1995, bomb went off. I was in the office. The ENG wanted to show that the country could give a fair trial and due process to these individuals. This was right after the O.J. Simpson case where there was such fanfare and media attention. Merrick wanted it to be all about crime that had occurred and holding individuals accountable.
In the original indictment itself, it did say physical, cervical, whatever was out there.
I'm not so confident that we got it. The thoroughness of the investigation. FBI interviewed so many people that we could find if you wanted to, find something that said that, Madonna did the bombing, you could find something like that. Both Nichols and McVeigh had paid defense to taxpayers. And I think their strategy differed. Stephen Jones had this whole public relations strategy where he traveled around the world finding others unknown.
To say that there were others unknown was true. We were accused of being conspiracy theorists, but it was the government that alleged there was a conspiracy. We were just simply arguing over how large was the conspiracy and who was there. Young one would be seen as
this was the perfect mission. The building was destroyed, people were killed, there will be a revolution. I accept the revolution in me. No one else, me myself. It took probably about 7 or 8 days for me to start realizing what he was repeatedly. Probably the first one, I said, Tim, you told me that no one else was involved. So why is the government offering to my son Lord for you? What do they know that we don't? He didn't want to reveal the unsure. He didn't want to solve the mystery.
It was actually my husband Glenn who started asking questions.
What's consumed our life? Our life is 180 degrees south. That's right. And it probably will never be the same.
After the bombing, I was so broken. For the first few weeks, I probably sit in a chair and cry. But when I got out of the chair, we had a dinner at our home for the families that had lost their children. The saddest of times, we get 19 families that lost their children. One of the young mothers said that when she dropped her boy off at home, that she had seen the bomb squad downtown. And I said, well, how do you know it was a bomb squad? Finally, there was
다현이 벌써 왔는데?
a big blue letter. Then we found a newspaper.
엄마 옷 갈아입었어? 다현아 5분만. 이렇게 일찍 올 줄 몰라. 아이, 못 갈아입었어.